So if you haven't already, you can get the book Trauma Bonded anywhere you can buy books. It is also exclusive to Audible for audiobooks. And it is selling like crazy. It has been an amazing experience. So also shout out to our fan base who have already purchased that book and for the wonderful feedback. I believe the last time I checked, it still has like 4.8 or 4.9 stars on Amazon and on Goodreads. And I believe we've got some reviews now on the Barnes & Noble site as well. So please, if you buy the book, we would love to hear your thoughts on it. And the best gift you can give us is a review on the book. So having said that, and given all of our announcements, I would like to introduce our guests for today. So Alex, if you can please bring MJ and James out of the green room. So Mason and I met MJ and James when we were stationed at Fort Bragg in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And James, I knew you better because you were in the High Council, so we saw you a lot. And that was at the same time, Mason, you were the first counselor in the bishopric. Unpacking Mormonism and Other Religious Trauma is meant for educational purposes only. Hello, and welcome back to Unpacking Mormonism and Other Religious Trauma. I'm really excited to be here today. I am joined in the green room by my co-host and very sexy husband, Mason. He's waving. And then we've got some special guests that we're going to introduce here in a little bit. But before we do that, I'm so excited to share this. So our Christmas gift to you, the listener, is that our producer has put together some fun clips that will start playing on the Libsyn. That's our host. I'm sorry. So on the podcast platforms of some of our bloopers, funny moments, the best content. He's got that all put together. And so that's our Christmas gift to you all. So definitely check that out. But then the other Christmas gift that maybe this is my Christmas gift, I'm super excited about it, is the movie trailer or the book trailer. So this is these are video clips from our lives that correspond with the book. And then we're also using this movie trailer in the process of finding sponsors because we are working very hard on adapting the book Trauma Bonded, a true story of navigating attachments forged in complex PTSD, to film. And I'm super excited about that. Super excited to be working with Aaron Toronto, who is a friend and movie producer, director, we're just really excited about it. So take us away, Alex. Let's watch the trailer really quick. Roll that movie trailer / book trailer.
My face.
We're doing karate, sparring. Ooh, this is gonna be deadly. Ow! Ooh, I'm getting in there. Cool.
Heads are off limits. See you, brother. 3. Ha ha ha! Oh.
Oh.
You saw him again?
Oh.
He's manipulating you. Why do you keep going back to him?
No one wants to say any of that.
Because I love him.
I forbid you from seeing him again.
You are not my father.
But I am your husband. And I'm pleading with you, come back to me.
I'm trying, Mason. Be patient with me. Please. And I love watching it. I love seeing our family, Mason, in those younger years. So much fun. And then just the tug at my heartstrings when the voiceover comes in regarding the affair. So if you haven't already, you can get the book Trauma Bonded anywhere you can buy books. It is also exclusive to Audible for audiobooks. And it is selling like crazy. It has been an amazing experience. So also shout out to our fan base who have already purchased that book and for the wonderful feedback. I believe the last time I checked, it still has like 4.8 or 4.9 stars on Amazon and on Goodreads. And I believe we've got some reviews now on the Barnes and Noble site as well. So please, if you buy the book, we would love to hear your thoughts on it. And the best gift you can give us is a review on the book. So having said that, and given all of our announcements, I would like to introduce our guests for today. So Alex, if you can please bring MJ and James out of the green room. So Mason and I met MJ and James when we were stationed at Fort Bragg in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And James, I knew you better because you were in the High Council. So we saw you a lot. And that was at the same time, Mason, you were the first counselor in the bishopric. And I was, for the first half of our time in Fayetteville, I was the primary president. And for the second half of our time in Fayetteville, I was the early morning seminary teacher. So let's talk about a time suck for our family for sure. But also, I'm going to say some of the best years for us, Mason. I think we were thriving in the church when we were in Fayetteville, North Carolina. So James and MJ, why don't you introduce yourself? And it is completely up to you if you would like to introduce yourselves with your last name. So take it away and tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Thanks, Sarah. So yeah, when we met you guys, that was in like a absolute pivot point for us in the church. At that point, we had just moved from a different house in the same area. Well, you knew James because of his high council work. You didn't meet me until we moved into your ward. And we moved into your ward shortly after we had James had just lost his endorsement as an LDS chaplain in the Army. And we had just been threatened with excommunication. And we were hidden away in the nursery. So
I didn't even, okay, I'm going to be completely honest. I didn't even realize you were so you guys ended up in Third Ward with us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I did not.
We did not speak in church.
We were
they
not
did
allowed.
not have us doing anything.
I don't know if we were blacklisted, but that's how it felt.
Yeah, we were.
I'm sure you were. I'm sure there was a note or something. So, because when we went, so clarification for the audience, Mason and I actually went, we were at Fort Bragg and he was in the bishopric and I was teaching early morning seminary. And then we went to San Antonio so that Mason could do the captain's career course and anesthesia school. And then we went back to Fort Bragg for another, how long were we there the second time? 2 years, Mason, this second time. And the second 2 years, I once again taught early morning seminary. And Mason at that point was in the stake Sunday school presidents. No, you were the stake Sunday school president.
Yeah.
Holy cow. I didn't even know you were in our ward. Did you have my kids in nursery?
Maybe. I don't know. Cute little kids.
You probably did have, did you have our little Abigail? Abigail would have been the one you would have had in nursery. Yes. Our little black daughter.
Depending on when
one of the only black children in the ward. So we had.
We didn't see color.
I don't remember specifically having a little black girl in or not in the class.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, anyway, it was quite the ordeal, which was you want us to go ahead and introduce
Yeah, go ahead. I feel a little ashamed of myself that I did not know that we were in the same ward. That I mean,
somebody's design.
Oh my goodness. Well, and I think that says a lot about how you guys got hidden away. And, we have, so at that time we'd have had our son Brig, who's schizophrenic, who we were always, I was always on top of him for everything. And so most likely Mason and I would have swapped, but I probably would have had one of my older kids dropping the little kids off at nursery to reduce tantrums. And so, yeah, I wouldn't have known at all, especially that second half when Mason was doing anesthesia stuff. Our lives were like medical school and residency. Yeah, tunnel vision. I was so self-absorbed, just trying to survive. So, but yeah, I'm a little ashamed that I didn't know you guys were in our ward. That would have been with the different bishop. So that actually would have been with the Black bishop, who his wife and him, I just loved them because they taught me so much about how I was saying things that would be considered racist that I had no idea, because our little daughter Abigail was, goodness, less than a year old. So when we would have gotten there, she'd have been like 6 months.
Just a quick comment too before you get started on your story, is that it kind of does speak to the fact, or kind of does speak to the ability that you have to kind of hide people away, whether on purpose or not on purpose. Sometimes you do it on purpose, sometimes it just happens because you end up in a calling where you're just not able to really meet with people. Like when I was in the bishopric at Fort Bragg, I knew everybody.
Yeah, we were very visible our first 3 years there.
Well, and I made it a point of knowing everybody. I'd started as the executive secretary. I knew everybody, at least everybody that was active or semi-active, I knew. And then when I came back in 2014, I was in anesthesia school and they put me in a state calling, and I hardly knew anybody that was new in our ward. Right. And it's just, the work that you do can be fulfilling, of course, but it can leave you lonely because you end up in a situation where you just don't, you don't have the friendship, the support that you would normally get, or in this case, that they didn't want you to have. Yeah. It's almost like
we were in the same state, so we were known. We were in the same state.
Right.
We were known.
Well, especially with your husband being a high counselor who traveled around. And were you doing music at that time, MJ?
A little bit there in the Fayetteville scene. Yeah, I played the festivals down in Fayetteville and stuff.
Awesome. All right. Well, Mason, let's shut up and let them tell their story. I'll shut up. Y'all can tell your story.
Okay, great. So I didn't notice the seeds of discontent or I didn't start blaming the church or ascribing some of our issues to the church until I think we were in North Carolina at the time, and I had struggled for years and years with like sexuality shaming, like fear, tons of anxiety around sexuality. And it was at this time that, one thing led to another. And in order to shed some of the sexual shame, and not only that, some of my physical shame from my physical body.
From breast cancer.
I had breast cancer, and I had scarring, and I was very, like, in the church, they teach you to not think bad thoughts, and tons of thought stopping,
right?
And curiosity, like the body.
Thought stopping also leads to emotional stopping. So not only are you stopping your thoughts, but you're not allowed. Like when you do that, you're not feeling the intensity of what's even going on for you. So yeah, keep going.
So physicality was very confusing, and even though like permissions were given within marriage, the physical body was hyper objectified rather than, or either hyper objectified or neutralized. It could not be like a sexual thing. Anyway.
I was just going to say too, like OCD and scrupula, like she wasn't able to have genuine spiritual experiences either in the church because of her lack of bodily knowledge of herself and others. She would be thinking about penises during the sacrament.
I would go to the temple and I would be like, he's got a penis, and like sabotage my own experience because
she didn't know what they looked like other than me.
Right. And so this is going somewhere.
No, you are totally fine. We have no issues talking about penises at all here at Unpacking Mormonism. I am a huge fan of all the penises. But before I let you make that point, wanted to let you know that 3 Fearless Boys and I'm going to say Nidus have both said hello. And 3 Fearless Boys says that they are looking forward to this. So I want to say welcome and thank you for joining us and keep on going. I've got to understand why we're focusing on penises in the temple. Like I'm at the edge of my seat here.
I just want you to know that all the penis talk, I had to take off your shoes. I was getting a little.
So in light of that, I decided,
like intrusive thoughts.
Yeah. In light of all of that, I decided I needed some exposure therapy. This was my choice, exposure therapy. And so I did a naked 5K. I signed up for a naked 5K.
I love that. It's such a, I love that. I remember the first time. So I'm like totally savage. I'm like taking over here.
Yeah, why don't you just shut up over there and let
No.
them
I want to connect. So I connect through stories. I have a very good friend and she took me to a Korean spa in Dallas, Texas, the King Spa. They have one in Richmond, Virginia, Dallas, and Chicago, I believe. And I've been to the one in Dallas several times. And in they have private male-female locker rooms, but they're nude. And so you can sit in the hot tubs nude, the sauna nude, the cold tub nude, massaging is going on, like appropriate medicinal massage and body exfoliation, but nude. And then the showers are all open. It's a Korean bathhouse. And I remember how therapeutic that was for me. And now I didn't do anything with the male side. Now I want to go in the male side, but they won't let me. But like it was therapeutic to see that everybody looked as different as it did. And I was like, I'm normal. It was so healing in that one moment. And now I go there any chance I get. Any chance I'm in Texas in the Dallas area, I go because it was wonderful. So I love that you did a naked 5K. That's just wonderful. Keep going.
So I love that you shared that. Thank you. Mm-hmm. I had James come with me. I was going to bring a girlfriend with me because I didn't want to go alone. And then
she didn't want me going.
I didn't want him going.
Right, because there's boobies.
Right.
There's boobies.
There's going to be boobies flopping around as we.
And I didn't want to go because I was terrified of getting an erection in front of other people. Because my idea was that if you see naked people, you're automatically going to get an erection. Because that's what the church teaches you, right? Like,
right. Well,
and thoughts,
yeah.
Well, and that's so normal. Like, even if you get an erection, it'll go away soon.
Absolutely.
And I mean, it's what's supposed to happen. There's nothing wrong with you seeing something and getting an erection. Like, that does not mean you are suddenly going to go rape somebody or cheat on your wife, or like, it just means you have a human body and it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do.
So I had huge erection shame. I had erection shame.
Wow, thank you, James, for that. Huge erection, y'all. Okay, keep going.
I had shame, and I didn't want to go. Anyway, go ahead.
Sorry, that was the best slip up ever. So huge shame.
Huge shame
from going. But you did go with her though?
Her friend couldn't go, and so she asked me to go.
So he came,
and I was terrified.
Yeah, okay. But we went. It was scary getting out of the car and just having our sneakers on and walking, but we did it. And we can tell the whole story at another time. But when I was through with that, my intrusive thoughts ended.
Mm-hmm.
They were done. They were done, and I could engage in spiritual experiences now without that intrusion. My fear of breasts diminished significantly. Like I felt like I was running with the buffalo, like I was part of humanity now, whereas we always kept humanity separate. We are special and humanity's over there. And it was beautiful. And we did another one a couple of years later, and we didn't we didn't keep the second one secret. And that
Because it was so good.
It was so beneficial.
Right. Yes.
And
I love it.
that's what led to him losing his endorsement and our threatened excommunication.
So one of my fellow.
Okay, wait a minute. So I gotta slow you down.
Threatened.
Yeah.
So you got threatened with excommunication because you ran naked in a group. No sexual. I just want to make this very clear for our listeners. There was no sexualized contact with anybody else. You just ran naked with other humans.
Mhm.
That's it's crazy, and I'm gonna bring up a parallel here in a minute. So number one, I want to say, MJ, my experience on my own body shame. So Mason has kind of referred to this in the past. I'm going to bring it up. So when we got married, I had, the perfect model body you could ever want. I was 99 pounds. I'm short. I'm petite. I was sculpted. I've got big boobs, but they were nice and perky where they're supposed to be. Like, I was sculpted and cut. I could have been a bikini model and done well. At that time in my life, because I was a dancer, I was a cheerleader, I was an athlete. We get married. I kept my body in that shape until my first baby. And after the first baby, now I've got a teeny bit of a muffin top because I had a C-section. You can buy Trauma Bonded, a true story of navigating attachments forged in complex PTSD by me, anywhere books are sold, including Audible. So I'm still super thin, but my naked body, I didn't really have stretch marks after Hayden, but, I wasn't as sculpted and firm. So even though I fit in the same clothes, even though I was the same size, I looked different. And Mason struggled with that. Like, there was no prep. And he said something that started to really haunt me. And that became this intrusive thought over and over. And he apologized sincerely, like Mason did, everything he could, as genuinely as he could, to make that one stupid comment feel better. And then after the naked spa with my friend, where I'm surrounded by women of all shapes and sizes and ages. So, there were, that first day that we went was a weekend in Dallas. So you have to be an adult unless you're with a parent. So there were some kiddos there that were, 8, 9, 10 with their mamas, but there were several like early 20s, all the way up to, there was probably a lady there in her late 80s, all ethnicities. So, it's Dallas. So there were Black women, Asian women, white women, and Hispanic women all right there. And nobody's staring at each other. And, from what I can tell, nobody's judging, because there's none of that like scrutiny look. I was probably the obnoxious one, like just staring like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize this. I left that spa, body shame gone. That hurt that Mason had ever said anything about my body. And growing up in a family where you had to look perfect to be loved, gone. It just vanished. So I love that you're telling this story about the naked run, because I agree with you. My experience in a community of nudity that was not sexual at all healed me as well. And I loved it. And I took Mason back, and I don't think Mason had the same experience at all. But the other thing that I wanted to bring up is you got threatened with excommunication. There was no sexual sin at all. So my question for you, James, is how often in the military did you shower in a community of other men?
All the time. Like especially in my first battalion, every day.
So why didn't they threaten excommunication then?
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's just so, it's so bizarre, because so in our ward, the first time in Fayetteville, our bishop, who was a good friend of ours, was an infertility specialist. And I have infertility. And he's the reason that I have our youngest biological son, who in that movie trailer was the little white baby laughing hysterically while I'm going boo at him, right? That kid would not be here if it hadn't been for that bishop also being my infertility doctor. And I was his primary president. And we kept it like the way we boundaried it is that at church, he was bishop. When we were doing church business chats, he was bishop. When I was at the hospital, he was doctor. And then when we were in his home and it was casual, I used his first name. And that was just, it was normal. He was the only Army infertility specialist. And he was definitely the best. Like, he's still one of the like world-renowned infertility specialists. He's very, very good at what he does. He saw my privates. I was naked in front of him. He did surgery on me. He and my husband talked about church business while he was giving me an exam. It was normal. He and I talked about church business while he was giving me sonograms while we were checking the egg size. So there was a lot of enmeshed boundaries there. Yes, it was medicinal, but the church obviously doesn't have problems with non-sexual nudity contact. So why is the run so different? Mason, what was your thought?
Well, you're forgetting one significant piece is that they chose to do that. Surgery isn't generally a choice. Going to the doctor, not generally a choice. You need to do it. Showering together in the Army, sure, you made the choice to join the Army, but you don't have a choice as to whether or not you're showering together. I don't think that it's a significant difference, but it is a difference. And so that just needs to be brought out there because they chose to go, and MJ whispered it under her breath there, boobies, right? I think that's what you whispered, right, MJ? I mean, I can usually pick out when somebody says boobies. So
yeah, he's definitely a boob guy up there.
But it's the choice, right? Because you put yourself in that situation where now you can see so many people in all their naked glory. I don't think that is a bad thing at all, but I can understand why somebody in their prudish, scrupulous way said, I don't think so. So yeah. What
and it's interesting because Mason, if we were when we were in Europe, nudity is in a lot of ways just a part of their culture in certain aspects. So in other countries, being nude around other people and being Mormon, I don't know, would the rules be different? Like when in Rome, when in France, when in
Yes.
Go ahead, MJ.
When James was a chaplain, he was a hospital chaplain and he worked on the trauma unit. So he was called to every trauma. And so as a cute little Mormon wife, very modest, obeying all the rules, he would go and while he was there in San Antonio, there was a busload of cheerleaders that had an accident and they brought them all into the trauma room. What's the first thing you do in a trauma room? Take all their clothes off.
Cut their clothes off.
So James is going to work daily seeing naked men and women.
Mm-hmm.
It's already there. Part of his church endorsed job as a chaplain. And I had to figure out how to deal with that.
Right.
Yeah. And
so me going to a naked 5K was not a threat beyond what's already happened,
Right. Yeah. Same for Mason. I remember Mace, when you were in Madigan, right? That's Fort Lewis.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember the first time Mason came home and told me you were so ashamed. You had to do an EKG. I mean, he's a nurse at this point. He's doing an EKG and he'd only done them on, older women that, didn't have the model bodies and whatnot. And then he had to do one on a younger woman. And he came home and he's like, I'm so ashamed because I had a physical response. And I mean, yeah. And just like, I feel like I've done something. Or like, you came home telling me that you needed to talk to me about it. And I was like, dude, you're going to be seeing boobs and vaginas on the regular as a nurse.
But that's the difference is that when I came home and told you about it, you were like, okay, this is part of your job, right? How many men or women come home to their spouses in a scrupulous church and say, hey, this is what happened, and their spouse freaks out, says, oh my gosh, you did what? Like you can't be there anymore, right? And it's a normal response if you haven't been taught that this is okay, right? If you've been taught that you do not seek that out, you don't see that stuff, you turn your head, whatever, then it makes sense that you're going to respond in a very scrupulous way, which is why the education is important, which is why it is okay for us to say, hey, nudity is not the problem.
Right.
Having a physical response to nudity is not the problem. It's what you do with your mind, and it's the choices that you make after that. You know, if
Yeah.
you struggle with that, if seeing all those boobies makes you want to go out and now have an affair or something, well, then you need to figure out where you go from there and check that or whatever. But understanding that you can see those things without becoming, you know,
Sexually aroused.
right, or a sexual predator or whatever.
Right. No, you can become aroused, but you don't have to act
Right, without
on
becoming
that.
a predator. You know, now you're going to
Right.
become a multiple rapist or something because you saw, you know, you went to a 5K and saw a whole bunch of boobies. Of course, that just doesn't mesh well.
Yeah.
So that's just not reality.
So thank you for sharing that. We've totally squirreled on it. Let's turn the time back over to you guys. Go ahead, James. I love that story, by the way. Like,
I think it's a really
amazing.
important thing to distinguish that it was not our bishop or stake president. It was from church headquarters. So our bishop president did not initiate any of this.
How did church headquarters figure it out?
So I had a chaplain friend that I let know about our positive experience, and he turned me into church headquarters. And
Mormon chaplain friend?
Mormon chaplain friend.
What a friend.
Right?
Oh,
Yeah.
like instead of coming to you and saying, hey, have you thought about the repercussions? Where do you feel like, I mean, because chastity's each and morality's each, they just jumped right up to the prophet?
Well, to our endorsing agent at the church headquarters.
Military relations.
Military relations. So he's not a 70. He's not like, but he has my job in his hand because he writes the endorsement for all military members that are chaplains.
Right. He has some type of ecclesiastical
power.
Whatever. Yeah. Our producer just like wrote in the chat, snitch.
Yeah.
That is not a friend. That's a snitch. And yeah. Oh, friendships in the church are really hard when you shift. So keep on going. I'll shut up.
So they sent a binder of all the reasoning of why they should hold a disciplinary council and excommunicate us to our stake president. And our stake president called us in and said, this is what I've been asked to do. Can you tell me why, like tell me your story. And we told him our story. And he says, I think you should go run another naked 5K.
Really?
Okay, hang on.
Really?
So is this the stake president that then went and served a mission in Poland, or the other one after that?
It's
Not the no. So that was not our. We were in we moved off post, and so this was the mission. This was the stake president. The one who served a mission is a different stake president. So we were in two different wards.
Got
Three different wards.
Okay, so you're in the other stake then at this point.
We're in the other stake. It's the stake president that was owned a carpentry.
Yep, I know who you're talking about now. I just wanted okay, so this is like that sneaky gossip. I'm like, okay, which stake president was cool enough and had enough forethought in his own head to be like, yeah, there's nothing wrong here. Do it again. I know who that is. I obviously will not say his name, but I have always admired that individual for being a progressive thinker and recognizing that you can't stuff everything in a box. And this just confirms that in my head. And I have contact with that individual. If it's who I'm thinking, I still know who they are. And I still have contact with that individual because of that ability to see humans for who they are And that's that. Yeah. Stake president and Bishop Roulet for sure. Mason, go ahead.
Well,
Sorry.
yeah, and someone that can see the positive benefits that you received from that experience. Like you said, if you wanted to remain active Mormon, if you can't even focus on the temple ceremony because of what's going on, you go and you have this experience, and now you're having the spiritual experiences that you want to have. I mean, you have to be able to see beyond what was that and recognize that this was a positive experience for you guys.
Yeah.
And suddenly the church that I love is telling me I'm bad. Not my local leaders, but the church.
Yeah.
Right. The big ones that don't know you
Right.
are labeling you. That's
And-
insane.
And so suddenly I had to decide if I was good or if they were wrong. Like if they were wrong and I'm good, then they're wrong. And that wasn't allowed in my head that they were wrong, because they were always right in my brain.
Right.
And that's when the fracture
Right.
happened.
Okay. And is this fracture happening before or after the breast cancer diagnosis the first time?
The first time I was 24, and this was happening like over 10 years after.
Okay. So you've got you've got scar tissue, but you're not actively fighting cancer at this time.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
Because one of the things I'm probably jumping ahead in your story, but one of the things that I have just so I've followed you on Facebook for many, many years now. You know, we've been kind of that Facebook friends because of our connection there at Fort Bragg. But when you posted the pictures of you going topless at the pool after your surgery, number 2, right? We're talking about recent past now. I was like, go MJ, you're a warrior. And like my admiration of your ability to push against those norms just grew exponentially. So just wanted to say that. And I'm sure that you were comfortable with that based on where it started, running naked 5 miles. Now, I will say that I do not recommend a naked 5K because I hate running. But if you love running, go for it.
Go to the
Alrighty.
spa. Go to the spa instead.
Yeah, I'm a naked spa, nude beach fan. Like nudity and relaxing, nudity and running sounds awful to me, but not a moral dilemma. Just I don't want to sweat. Yuck. unless I'm with horses or doing manual labor. I hate running. Mason hates running. That's why we're married. We both hate running.
Oh yeah,
So.
sure. That was the reason right there.
Alrighty.
Us together
So
all
I'll sum up real quick then, just so we can get to our main topic. I had fractures from when I was going to BYU to be a chaplain, and I was exposed to scholarly anti-Mormon material at BYU, intentionally by BYU, so that we would be prepared as chaplains. And I'd only been exposed to like backwoods North Carolina anti-Mormon stuff. I'd never been exposed to scholarly work, and that started my wow, there's some irreconcilable things here. I became a chaplain, and I continued deconstructing and informing Martha of things that I was coming across and learning. One of the big things for me was realizing that Elder Maxwell, my favorite apostle, was wrong when he talked about anger, because to be a clinical chaplain in a hospital setting, you have to come to terms with there being positive anger, and that it has an appropriate role. And anger for a lot of general authorities was sinful. Right. And so that was the first time.
Real quick, want to plug in. You were a chaplain. When you talk about being a chaplain, I want to make sure our non-military listeners recognize chaplain in the Army means that you are dealing with PTSD, and like you are not dealing with your regular norm. You are dealing with combat veterans back and forth, where healthy anger is and has to be a part of that healing. So we're not talking about something bad happened and I get mad. I'm going to call that like your general run of the mill normal anger, which also is healthy, positive, and needs to be expressed.
Right.
You're seeing like the extreme ends and everything in between, and recognizing, you know, as a chaplain, I know you guys get some like counseling training. You're not licensed counselors, but one of the very first things that we talk about in those trainings is all of the emotions are healthy and normal, and ways to work through those, not take offense at them, not be afraid by them, and how to help people work through it and de-escalate anything that's dangerous. So I just want to make sure that we put that plug in. You're dealing with combat veterans, most of whom are still active duty soldiers, probably. Keep going.
Absolutely. And just my training was different than what most military members' training was, because I went to BYU and they had
Military chaplain training.
military chaplain. My training at BYU, we got all the coursework in marriage and family therapy and in psychology, but without the clinical supervision. So we weren't licensed. And then when I became a hospital chaplain for the Army, we have a year-long clinical supervision to be a hospital chaplain.
Right. You're probably actually very close in certification to being able to be either an LPC or an LMFT would be my guess.
Correct.
Like as far as the academics go, you'd probably just need to do like a refresher course in your clinical hours to get that licensure. Right. It's a great job. I like it.
So going through that and the clinical work at the hospital and having a realization that the prophets and apostles don't have a clue when it comes to healthy behavioral health, healthy therapy, works. Or, you know, they are, and listening to people like Natasha, formerly Helfer, I don't remember.
Parker, Natasha Helfer Parker. Yeah, Parker. So I had left the church, but when the church excommunicated Natasha for utilizing evidence-based practices in her therapy, I came to Mason and said, I'm removing my name from the church because, number one, that's the way that I'm supporting somebody in my field getting excommunicated for appropriate medical intervention, but also I do the exact same thing in my clinic. It's only a matter of time. And for our special needs kids, I can't make my excommunication public. So I'm going to do it for them. So yes, Natasha Helfer Parker is when I listen to her stuff, she is a very skilled LMFT and licensed sex therapist. She and I utilize the same practice models. So yeah, it was love her. And she's an evidence-based practitioner. She's not using voodoo, like where she's using theories that are tested and demonstrated to be effective over long term, same as you do. So mental health used to be a very quote unquote soft science. And as we've shifted the way we research it, it's becoming a more hard science. So keep going.
And so for me, it was seeing the church was really good to me. I'm white. I'm straight. I'm a male.
You have a penis.
I have a penis.
Right.
The church was really good for me. And cradled me through trauma in my life. Right. But I saw that the church was doing, I felt, more harm than good. And so that for me was a big breaking point. For Martha, it was more patriarchy. And was the missing women, missing Heavenly Mother.
They integrated. We are daughters of heavenly parents. They integrated Heavenly Mother somewhat in there, and then they left her out completely. Like, don't talk about her. Don't try to understand her. Like, whoa, right. You do not give me my mom, and then tell me I can't have her. Like,
right,
no.
Right. Well, because not having a mom is traumatic. I mean, and I look at the research. So let's talk about a little bit about the research. So what I'm seeing coming out of the research of LGBT couples raising children is that the children that come out of those relationships with the best mental health awareness, and they're, stable, and they make an income, and they're doing well, are kiddos that were loved by somebody in the family from both genders. So like it's, yes, two men can absolutely raise a baby, and that baby is going to be great when you have, positive grandmother figures or positive female friends in the home. Like we need both male and female influences in our lives to grow and develop appropriately. And yes, in the church, in that existential place, we're missing half of what we need for our spiritual nourishment. If you're thinking about this life as a model of the next one, which is what Mormonism teaches, why am I being raised in a single parent home, church home, when it's frowned upon in every aspect of our tangible physical lives? So yeah, I love that. I'm more with James on the side of I left because of I started to really question because of the lack of healthy therapeutic and mental health of the members of the church, because I was seeing it in my clinic, and my LDS clinics were vastly stunted in their ability to heal from basic anxiety and depression. We're talking about not huge traumas. We're talking about just anxiety and depression, and they couldn't get better when all my non-Mormon clients were. And I was like, this can't be me. I'm not shifting my treatment modality other than, just the way I present it for certain personalities, which I do. But after a couple of years of that, I was like, I got enough data here. There's a problem. And I remember there was a short little time there where Holland started talking about mental health and depression. And I was like, yes, we're getting there. And now I go back to those talks and I'm like, yes, no, 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 yes, no. And it's this like, okay, you're like packaging this mental health piece in a whole lot of icky. It's like you've got a teeny gold nugget with a shit M&M candy crust around it. And that was really hard for me. So.
I just want to say, and we should probably move on to the actual topic at hand, but for those of you that are watching this that would like more of a conversation on Mother in Heaven, you can go to our episode 213, where we talked about that for the episode. Very helpful conversation, I think, as we talk about how basically Mormon doctrine teaches that a family is not complete without mom and dad and kids, but they won't allow that on a spiritual level, at least not any kind of a connection. And then,
well, and I'm going to correct you, Mason. It's not mom and dad as much as it's male influence, female influence. It does not have to be mom, dad. It can be outside familial male, female influences.
No, not what I'm saying. The church teaches
got
male, female, mom, dad, but they won't allow you to have that on a spiritual level. Mom, dad, you can only have a connection with your dad. You can't talk to your mom. You can't have any conversations with your mom. You can't know anything about mom. Yeah. You can't ask her, how the hell are you handling being not the only mom? You can't ask her any of these kind of questions.
Breast cancer.
Yeah, how do I handle breast
cancer? You can't say, what is going on here? Why am I having these problems with my body? All those things where you would probably have a much better connection with your mom. I mean, what woman who's struggling with breast cancer wants to go to their dad and say, hey, dad, I'm struggling with my boobs, right? It just, some people will, I'm sure, but a lot of women, I imagine, would be more comfortable talking about that with mom who has boobs.
Yeah, well, and, I'm going to show this comment. I love this comment from Amanda in the sense of what we're describing is not a loving father. Any father that stops you from having a relationship with your mother when your mother is safe and nurturing for you, which I would assume our heavenly mothers are, that's very problematic. So let's take a quick commercial break. Unpacking Mormonism. We'll be right back. Absolutely. And I love, Mason, that you went back to that. I actually think so. Just want to spoiler alert, we're having MJ and James back again in the future on a different topic, because when we connected, it was like a whole laundry list of things we could talk about. So we're absolutely going to have them back. Is there anything else, MJ or James, about your story that you want to share? Mason, go ahead and ask your question. And then, we'll go ahead and move into the initiatory
Really
stuff
just
that we came here to talk about. Go ahead.
really just because it kind of helps with your history as well. Were you both born and raised in the church?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, just because, I mean, that there's a lot that goes along with just knowing that helps people to kind of know where you came from. The rest of your story, I'm sure, is interesting and not really what we're here to do. So,
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that we've laid the groundwork with what we've shared so far to go ahead and move forward.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I love that. One of the reasons why I continue to talk about this, the sexual piece, is because yes, you've completely laid the groundwork for initiatory
yeah.
and some of the things that are there. So in our planning meeting, we talked briefly. So I'm going to open up our initiatory stuff with just some data, and Mason, feel free to jump in and correct me, or MJ and James, please feel free to jump in and correct me. And MJ, do you prefer to go by Martha or MJ?
I tell people my name's MJ, but if someone calls me Martha, it's kind of heartwarming.
I call her Martha. She
Okay.
introduces herself as MJ.
Awesome. I know you as MJ, so then since you have no preference, I'll keep using that. But if you have a preference, I will switch. So the initiatory is required. So the initiatory in the Mormon temple is required before you can go into the temple for any other ordinance other than baptisms for the dead. So our live show today is technically, quote unquote, out of chronological order. When these release on the podcast, they will be in a different order, to put it, kind of in a chronological order. So anyway, but the initiatory is the first inside the secret part of the this is hilarious. I have to put this up. This is from Kayla. Kayla is actually the guest that we had on where we talked about the mother in heaven. So she is probably in the background right now, like, yes, yes, yes. So love that. Thank you, Kayla. Kayla says, for those that are on the podcast, Kayla asks, is Martha your new name? And we will be getting to the new name today, but we won't necessarily be diving into all of the implications of the new name unless that's on James and MJ's schedule. So anyway, but as an adult, the initiatory is the first secret part of the temple. So the only other thing that we have where people enter the temple that's not quote unquote secret or as secret is the baptisms for the dead, which is where our youth age, now it's 11 and up. If you are turning 12 in that calendar year, you can go in. So anyway, I saw a comment there and it distracted me. So for the baptisms for the dead, which we are going to be talking about in a very short live episode, and then again, podcast will go in the right order here, but the youth can go in, the youth leaders can go in, and the worthiness requirements, they're the same, but sort of not necessarily as stringent because you're talking about youth and lots of dunking going on there. So that's I'll leave it at that. But so for the initiatory, it's the first step in the Mormon temple. Once you are past the entrance where you have to be on the list, you have to have a temple recommend for that in order to enter and participate. I'm actually, Alex, I'm going to put up the ones that I was going to do. So this right here, when you go in, when I went through the temple, I wore a shield similar to what you're seeing on the screen, except it had longer sleeves. I'll show that another picture of it here in a minute, but it was open on the sides. And for me, I was completely naked underneath this shield. So the more accurate length of sleeves is right here. I think our producer called this one the 70s party. He said it looked like a lot of fun and we all laughed at him. So our producer has never been Mormon. And then at the very end so I'm going to put this one back up. So at the very end of the initiatory is when number one, they give you a new name. Now I think they give it to you before. When do they give you the new name? Yeah, they give it to you in the initiatory, right?
Yeah. At the end
Yeah,
of the
at the very end,
Yeah.
you get a quote unquote new name, which is why Kayla was joking about the new name. And we will talk about that here in a little bit. And then they placed, or when I went through, they placed this garment upon our bodies and they dressed me. They didn't hand it to me and let me pull it on myself. They dressed me underneath this. And so for me, when I went through the temple, so I went through the temple in 1999 for the first time, and I got my new name, and I'm not going to disclose it yet. I got to send Alex a picture of it because it's just really fun. So then he can get that uploaded in the background. But for me, I grew up in a home where the law of chastity was taken to this huge extreme. So if you want to know about that, you can read my book. And I think that extremism of nobody's allowed to touch your naked body underneath your clothing except your husband. Modesty meant covering, no bare shoulders, shorts like to the top of my kneecap. I remember getting in trouble for having like Bermuda shorts that met like mid thigh. Now, for me, I'm so short that Bermuda shorts usually met my kneecap. And Daisy Dukes definitely did not show my hiney because I'm a very short person from the waist down. But there was no showing of that skin. Nobody is allowed to touch you. And in an episode that Mason and I are hoping to do later this weekend, or early next week, we are going to be talking about the temple prep class. So if you're listening to the podcast, that'll come, again, in chronological order. But nothing in the temple prep class told me that anybody was going to see my naked body or touch my naked body or put oil on my naked body or any of that other stuff. The other thing that was really weird for me was that the people doing this to me was female. Now, I was grateful for that because in the olden days, it used to be males. And I know James and MJ, you guys wanted to talk about some of those advancements. But for me, it was females. I've got these old grandmas doing all of this. And for me, I felt dirty. I felt like I was in trouble, like I was sinning in the temple. Now, they did not touch my private parts. They did not touch my boobs. They did not touch my vagina, but they were pretty damn close. And then, of course, there was no covering of the naked body because as you can see in this shield or this one, and then this is kind of the neckline of the men's. And Mason, I'm assuming the men's shield was very similar. This is our producer called this one the Feed Me slide, which just made me die laughing there. So anyway, in this shield, there is no covering up. Like they definitely saw stuff. And the other thing was when you're menstruating. So I went through the temple on my period. And so I actually bled into my shield a little bit. And my menstrual cycles were very heavy at the time. I was struggling with infertility, and if you read my book, you know that in my teen years, my period would start and it would never stop. And I was not allowed to take birth control pills because my dad thought that if I took birth control pills, it meant that he was giving me permission to have sex. So I get this on, and then at the end of the initiatory, I get this on, and I'm told I'm not supposed to wear regular underwear. So now I'm trying to put a menstrual pad into this contraption or over this contraption because I was told I was not supposed to wear underwear underneath my garment. And so I've got a pad inside these. Basically, so at that time they did not really have the tight fitting ones for the women. So I've got this pad that's not really sitting right. And then I'm pulling my regular normal underwear on top of that, hoping that it will hold the pad in place and whatnot. So I am going to put up this comment because I'm not the only one who experienced this. We've got a listener. So Rhonda says she went through in 1995. And she says, I was touched under the shield on my bare skin, on my chest, hip, without my prior knowledge of what was going to take place. Fear was coming up for me, wondering if they were going to touch my private parts. Yes, amen. I was terrified. I was like, what else are they going to touch? It was very uncomfortable and willing to go through with that if needed because salvation. And that's a huge point here. If you did not follow these rules, you could not get into the highest degree of heaven, because if you didn't go through this, you also could not get married in the temple. So if you bowed out at any time, your salvation was at stake. Your marriage to the person that you're supposed to love is at stake. Wanting to get married the next week for eternity. So yes, if Rhonda did not do this, she wouldn't have gotten married. Not informed consent. And I think that that's a huge thing that MJ and James, I almost said MJ and Martha, wanted to talk about. Then the other piece is, if you remember from our cult series,
Sarah.
yeah, Mace, give me one more second, then I will let you say something. The other thing is, in our cult series, we kind of talked a little bit about the troubling nature of giving you a new name. And so we were then given new names. So we get the, the garment placed upon us by somebody. We don't get to dress, like they put my feet through it and then I pulled it up over my hips is how I did it. But then the final piece that I wanted to add is, this also happened in quick succession with everything else. So there was no time after the initiatory to really process or talk to anybody about my concerns or my feelings of discomfort, because I went straight from the initiatory into the endowment session, which we will get to at a future time. Mason, go ahead. And then we'll turn it back over to, we'll go ahead and turn it back over to MJ and let you guys take it away.
So 2 quick things. The second thing is that even if you had had the time to sit and talk with somebody, you probably wouldn't have gotten any kind of real comfort, understanding either, because like Rhonda's comment said, this is all about salvation. You take it because you have to, right? If you want to get everything that you're supposed to get, you don't have a choice here. And then the first thing is just to clarify, from what I'm seeing online, is that the initiatory has always been done same sex. So when the women started receiving the initiatory in Nauvoo, it was always a woman that did the ceremony.
I did not know that. Thank you, Mason.
Because at that time you got naked, you passed through a shield into a bathtub, and they washed your body completely as part of the ceremony and then anointed you. But that was always a woman that did that to a woman and a man that did that to a man.
Well, and the last thing I want to say is, for me now as a mental health professional, looking back on that, I can see that experience very much as a grooming mechanism. If you can get through that, because your salvation is at stake and you're not allowed to talk about it with anybody outside of the temple, they gain control over you. It's very similar to how perpetrators of sexual assault work. So, all right, James and MJ, why don't you take it away and talk about your experiences? Because I know you had a very different experience than I did. Go ahead.
Military back in the day, they used to haze people to see if they were going to be able to handle it in the new elite unit, and it's almost like a hazing ritual to make sure to make sure that you are going to be, compliant with the new group. Anyway, go ahead, Martha, with your experience.
So, okay. Well, validating and recognizing that other people have a different experience. With my whole backstory of anxiety around sexuality, around naked bodies, you would think that I would have had a negative experience or an anxious experience in the initiatory, but I didn't. It was the singular most beautiful experience I had in the church. Absolutely beautiful. A woman who was very similar to my mother. I had never met her before, but she was the one that took me through the initiatory little quads. And it was beautiful. I had heard before that they blessed different parts of your body and they would touch them. So I didn't know how it was going to be touched. But I was very relieved because I heard that they touch and bless your breast. And I'm like, how's that going to go?
Right.
I was there. It was the most beautiful thing because a woman was there blessing me. That was a surprise. I guess
Right, because it's
Yeah.
the only time in Mormonism that women are allowed to lay their hands on your head and do anything similar to a quote unquote priesthood blessing. Yes, that weirded me out. For me, it was like, I am not certain this is okay. I love that for you. That was beautiful. That's
so
great.
so I went into it with this not questioning. It was whatever's about to happen is okay. And it took all of the anxiety off of me. Like touching my body, nakedness, like it was okay. So I went into it and she started touching me. She blessed my eyes by touching right here. She blessed my lips by touching right here. And then she did the cutest thing. And it's something that I am so sad that I don't get to relive because they've changed it completely.
Mhm.
But she touched my nose and she's like, your nose. And she did this little scrunch of your nose. And it was so cute and endearing. Like, okay, I feel like a child. And then I was just surprised that it was just blessing after blessing that I didn't know what I was going to get. But I got all these blessings pouring down to me on a list from my Heavenly Father. And I thought, this is so beautiful. I loved it. I loved that part. The rest of it, like,
Yeah.
weirded me out when they were putting my garments on me, and like
Right.
it was one piece for me. They started at the bottom and then they pulled it up over my
Yeah,
arms.
and then you zip it. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was positive for me there.
Yeah, I love it. I want to say, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because it's been years, is that first they do all of the touching. It's all the same spots. But first it's with water to quote unquote wash you. At least that's what it was in when I went through in 1999. I know that things have changed. And then the second part, so first they wash everything. So, we're washing your head for clean mind and those types of things. And then they pronounce you clean every whit, which is forgiveness of your sins. And for me, for me, when they told me that I was clean every whit and that I'd been forgiven of my sins again, just like I was at baptism, that was a beautiful experience for me because if you've read my book, you know that I'd had premarital sex as a 16-year-old with my high school sweetheart. And I did not tell Mason because I was instructed by my parents not to, or he would leave me. And then I was giving up the best opportunity for marriage. And so to be in the temple and being told you're forgiven for that horrible thing, quote unquote, horrible thing that you did.
Yeah.
I finally felt in that moment like, oh, maybe I am good enough for my husband, who is the perfect Mormon. I also wanted to, for those who are not watching us live, read Amanda's comment that says, I was so blown away by the fact that a woman was performing this ordinance for me. I didn't even realize how much I was starving for that until it was handed to me. And I think that comment really demonstrates just how much women are craving nurturing female leadership that actually has a say in how things go in the church, because I love my men, but women are naturally better at understanding the struggles of women. And so when I was sick with miscarriages, one of my experiences is that I was having a miscarriage and Mason's dad gave me a blessing and told me that the baby would live. And I instantly knew it's already gone. There's nothing to live. Like I've done enough miscarriages. I know this process. But he pronounced that the baby would live and I had nothing to worry about. A female who had experienced any kind of child loss, miscarriage, anything would never have given me that harmful blessing in the word of God. And so I think that, just kind of that, yes, in the temple, in the initiatory is the only place women are able to lay their hands upon your head, church approved, lay your hands upon your head and bless you with permission from God. The other comment I wanted to put up here is that Rhonda, so Rhonda's the one that talked earlier about how uncomfortable this made her, but that she had no choice to go on because she wanted to get married, is that this in a way reinforced what her comment says, which is, I went on to accept unwanted sexual touch at times, thinking it was my duty. My body wasn't mine. And I just want to say, I've heard that my body doesn't belong to me in the church over and over and over again. So Mason, go ahead and make your comment.
Well, and I think that, I mean, that particular thing is not exclusive to Mormonism, but we certainly perpetuate it. And I think it's important to recognize that. A couple things I wanted to point out. I think it's important to recognize that the ordinances hold different meaning for different people at different times in their lives. And so the fact that you could go through that ordinance, and even though some parts of it were a little weird, it was incredibly important for you. It meant a lot to you because of the blessings that you were getting, or because a woman was the one doing it, or whatever the reasons were. You can go through these ceremonies and get a lot of spiritual benefit from them, and a lot of people do, right? A lot of people still active in the church do still get spiritual benefit from them. So this is not in any way an attempt to demonize what's going on, but it is an attempt to show that some of what's going on is uncomfortable, and there's no place for people to talk about it. There's no place to even be prepared about it. How hard would it be in a temple prep class to say, hey, look, this is what's going to happen, and just get the weirdness out of the way right there. Talk about the weirdness and say, it's going to be a little weird because, of course, we focus on chastity and we don't want people to be naked in front of other people. And you take 15 minutes and you take all the discomfort out because you can talk about it. But we don't do that. We talk about the spiritualness and how great it's going to be that you get to go, without really addressing the things that take from the spiritual experience, that make you feel like, whoa, you freeze up. You don't want somebody touching your naked body, but you freeze up because you don't know if you have another choice. And then what happens is people like Rhonda somewhere down the road, they freeze up again because they don't know. They haven't been taught that they have a choice, and they feel like they're stuck. And that's not what we want to perpetuate. The last thing was, I don't remember. So I guess
I'm gonna jump in with the last thing for you, Mason. I want to say that when I was working with a lot of LDS clients, it was pretty common for me to have clients that had gone through the initiatory who had previous histories of sexual assault, and it was horrific for them, to the point of PTSD symptoms and dreams and the normal things that come with PTSD of being in the temple and being violated. And so there's just so much context. For some people it can be gorgeous and beautiful, and for others terrifying and horrific, and everything in between. So go ahead, James and MJ, let's give that back to you. Go ahead.
Two quick things. I didn't know that I was going to be pronounced clean every whit. That was such a wonderful surprise. Again, that was a really neat thing. And I didn't take birth control because, prophet had spoken against it. So we were married for 2 months, and I had my first miscarriage. And then 2 months later, I had my second miscarriage. And so I lived in Salt Lake, and I was weekly at the temple, going back to initiatory over and over because of those physical blessings. Now, as far as the temple ceremony changing over time, after we received it, we were pronounced clean every whit. But after we received it, the verbiage changed to, I anoint you only symbolically as follows. Only symbolically. And that took it all away. It's like, oh, I'm only symbolically clean every whit? Anyway, that was a sad thing for me.
Yeah, and sad for you. But then here we have Amanda who says, I went to the temple in 2008. So thankful changes were made to this process before then. For me, the initiatory was very special. And there's positive and negatives to that change. And honestly, I think that if they had left it the way they did before, like if they had left it with where there's more nudity and stuff, giving the person going through the choice. It could have been, you know, along the lines of, this is how this goes, this is what you're going to experience, and explicitly, you're going to be wearing a shield. We're gonna, you know, there's water and oil. The way that we've done it in the past is we touch your body, not, there's no private part touching, but we would touch your body under the shield and pronounce the blessings on you. But if that makes you uncomfortable, then we can do it symbolically, but it means the same in the end. If you're actually talking to people about the details of how you're going to be touched, and you don't have to give away the words, you don't have to, you know, it's going to be, we're going to, you know,
Right.
wash you with a droplet of water that's symbolic to a baptism kind of a thing. Like, you're not gonna be dunked. We're gonna tap you with water on our finger, and we're gonna tap your skin with oil on our finger, and we're gonna pronounce the ordinance and the blessings and the promises that come directly from your Father in heaven. How would you like to proceed? What makes you the most comfortable? If they were doing that, then it wouldn't have to change all the time, because people are being traumatized in our temples regularly, but you still keep that meaning. And then, like, for you, MJ, it could be like, we would do it symbolically, but the blessings mean the same. It's just we won't directly touch your body. We're just going to stand back with the words. Because I think now they just drop it on your head. I think the last time I went, it was just they dropped it on their head and kind of pointed in the direction, like when they're doing the facial stuff. It's just kind of like this. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. I think is what it was for me the last time. So yeah, James, go ahead.
Yeah, or could you imagine having the choice of being able to have the spa experience that you had as an option, where you go to do the initiatory, and in the early days of the church, you were completely nude. And imagine having, you know, many women who are nude, having a spa bath experience as part of their initiatory experience as an option. Or you can have the clothed option, or you can have the option where you are alone, clothed, or what, but have an array of options for people to be able to choose from. But, you know,
Get the picture up.
yeah, if we can put the picture up of the bathtub. But that's how the initiatory was originally done, was nude, and you were actually washed, not just touched. And so this was a bathhouse spa-like experience that people were going to without their consent and with heaven
On the line.
on the line.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so, but this, I would have chosen this if they would have offered it to me. Right.
Well, this is more similar to like a baptism, you know. However, in Mormonism, the baptismal font has to be under the ground so that it symbolizes, you know, the death, burial as you come up. Whereas this kind of a washing, I like, you know, MJ, you said earlier, it was kind of like you were a little kid being nurtured and cared for in a way. And then it kind of makes me laugh as an adult. They have to kind of scrub your sins off rather than them just getting, you know, rinsed off in the bathtub.
You've had a lot
something.
worse. It's a lot
Right.
worse.
It's a little harder. Let's scrub this one off. Yeah. But no, there's a great deal to be said for those who are comfortable being bathed by somebody who is safe. Can be a very connective and deeply meaningful experience. And for others, that would be like the worst thing ever.
Right.
So,
but you
absolutely.
tailor it. You tailor it is the big thing there, right? You talk to people about it beforehand. You let them know what to expect. You let them know that there's options. This is what you can do. And then people go in knowing what to expect, at least to some degree. And they have the kind of experience that you want them to have because they've already chosen to commit to this. They already know what's going to happen. And that's the big deal. I think Amanda just put up that comment too, is it's the informed consent. It's the idea that,
let me put that back up so that way,
once you're in the position, you know, how many, I was 19 years old. Like I went through the temple when I was 19. I was going on my mission like 2 months later or something. So I'm going in, I'm already called as a missionary. what 18-year-old, 19-year-old who's been raised in the church has the balls basically in the middle of a ceremony where all your family is around to stand up and say, whoa, this isn't what I expected at all. I'm out, right? Most people don't have that ability. They don't even have it in them at 18 or 19 years old. Some people do, and maybe they choose to do that. I don't know. But if you're raised in the church and you've taught your whole life that this is the crown right here, you're getting everything that you need right now. For women, oftentimes happens on the same day, right? You get your initiatory endowment and then you're sealed later on in the day. Everything happens. This is the crown. When something
Yeah.
uncomfortable happens, you don't have the fortitude to say, whoa, let me step back. I don't know what to do with this. I need some time. That is not an option. And that's not okay.
Well, and I want to say, Mason, I think that when I went through, I don't remember if it was my parents or the temple president or who it was, recommended that I do my endowment the day before our wedding so that I had enough time to think about it. But I think before, like, I got that advice and I was grateful for it. Cause I've got ADHD. I mean, like, you guys see the squirrel on the screen. Alex is putting it up. He'll probably come up here with my squirrel here in a minute. This is Sarah. There's my squirrel. Look, that's my little squirrel. His name is Nutty because I like his nuts. So anyway, but I have to, you know, kind of, I'm grateful for that because otherwise I would have never processed any of the temple stuff. And the other thing is just information overload. They give you so much, like the fast-paced initiatory. They give you so much information all at once in a short period of time, and then you're pushed right into the next thing where you get so much information that it's overwhelming. My patriarchal blessing actually says you will someday look at your temple experience as one of the most positive things in your life. And I tried so hard to make that true. And for my ADHD squirrely brain, it was like, I just can't get past how overwhelming and boring it is at the same time. So that's like forever. Go ahead, James and MJ. You can paper, rock, scissor out. Who goes first?
So the thing that was most disappointing for me going through the temple and the initiatory was in temple prep. They talked about how you see God. You can see God in the temple. God, that's God's house, and that is the place where you're authorized to see God. And those quotes had been given all over the place. And so I, going through the initiatory, wondered if this is where I'm going to see God, right? And going through the whole temple experience. I know this isn't the endowment and the sealing, but leaving the temple that day, I was hurt that I did not see God and didn't have the culminating experience of seeing God or angels in the temple. And so for me, going through the initiatory, I didn't care if I had to get naked. I didn't care if they cut my arm off. I didn't care what they did, because at the end of it, I was going to get to see God.
Yeah.
And I was going to be one of the select few. And we were told that the temple was the culminating spiritual experience of, like, anything. I had been to EFY and heard Michael McLean songs. I had, been in tears and testimony meetings, and I was expecting the temple to be better than that. I had gone to, youth conferences and had, just huge emotional experiences. And so going through the initiatory, I was like, where's the spiritual part?
Yeah.
Where's the part that makes me like, so I enjoyed the initiatory, but I was completely distracted from the initiatory. Like, I didn't care.
In anticipation of seeing
deity.
Yeah.
And so it was very disappointing. Like, I'm like, okay, cool. Like, do you need to touch me anywhere else? Like, what do we need to do in order to have this orgasmic spiritual experience that I'm supposed to be having?
Well, and you talk about that, you talk about EFY and all these amazing opportunities within the church. For me personally, I feel the most spiritually influenced when I'm in nature, when I'm connecting to animals, um, when people are listening or we're having a really intellectual conversation and we're both hearing each other and validating each other and sharing in that emotional experience. Like for me, that is the most spiritual experience I have ever had in my life is when those things line up, and not necessarily with an intimate partner, like just with friends or again, animals, natures. I remember having a huge spiritual experience the first time that I saw Havasu and Mooney Falls at Havasu Pi in the Grand Canyon in Arizona. That's where I grew up. And we hiked there, and I have no idea, Mason, why you have balloons going through your screen, but congratulations, whatever this is, right? So that was really funny. Yeah. Yay, Mason.
Alex
for,
just asked, what was that too? Like, I have no idea.
we have no idea, Alex, but it was incredible. So I want the snowflakes
That is like a secret
defying
code.
gravity. Like
Type
in
that
our
back in here.
in our countdown at the very beginning, we had like snowflakes going upwards. And I was like, oh, that's really nice for winter. No, so my spiritual experiences, the best ones I had, were always outside of the temple. And I think, to kind of speak to that, you're supposed to be closest to deity there. We had an experience the end of our first time in Fayetteville where we were in the process of adopting twins. I had custody for 6 days, and then dad did not follow through and sign the papers, and I had to give them back. And like, I say give them back. They were in the NICU. I was the first one to wash them, feed them. I spent hours there, skin to skin. Like these babies were mine as if I had given birth to them. And then dad refused to sign the papers. And instead of going home, they went into the foster system. Like just the way I think they went home and then almost immediately got picked up by the foster system. And I knew that was going to happen. And I remember going to the temple and just pouring my heart out and saying, God, you know that these babies will be better in our home based on the circumstances that they've been born into. And I like poured my heart out and I was praying like all the angels in heaven, please come help protect these spirits, and nothing. And I remember after that, like being just very angry. I kind of got this confirmation bias of they'll be yours in the next life. But now that I'm at this point in my life and I know what's happened to my girls. So one of our twins was murdered on Christmas Eve at her right after she turned 4 years old. And knowing that that's the life that they have now had when they could have come to us and been loved and safe is devastating to me. And that's for me, that's where I lost my faith in anything divine in the temple. Not because I had a significant loss, but because of what I knew and what I discovered as I sat through those court hearings after the death of one of our twins in our attempt to once again bring the surviving twin and her older sister into our home as an adoption. I was just disgusted that when a different opportunity was there, the angels could not intervene. So that was kind of my experience there. So I absolutely love the picture of the bathtub because I want to kind of switch into what did you want to talk about, James and MJ, about how this has changed over time and your thoughts on that, the things that we talked about in our planning meeting. Go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things that really shook me was, so this picture was taken by the church, and they went through and took pictures of all the different elements of the temple and published it in the early 1900s because a non-member had gotten into the Salt Lake Temple and taken photographs of the, and they were going to do an expose on Mormonism. And the church didn't want that person getting any money or profit off of their expose. So the church published their own expose on the church. And so I found out about this bathtub when I was at BYU, and it shook me that the temple ordinances had changed.
Yes.
That was a hard for me to understand, because I had read the words of the prophets about how the garments should never change also. And it shook me to learn that the garments had changed. And
I'm very grateful they did, but yes.
Yeah. And so it was hard for me to wrap my mind around. These are forever ordinances that are super, super, super important, yet they can change so radically, from going from naked and being washed all the way to a little dot on your head. And I'm like, are we turning Catholic? Like, what is, like, with the sprinkling, like, we're adapting to culture. What is this divine institution that can't withstand the buffetings of the world? And I felt like the church was moving more and more Puritan to adapt to the Puritan culture that this nation was founded on, rather than being counterculture the way that Joseph Smith had established and set it up. And it really disturbed me that that the church wasn't able to withstand the pressures of the world when I saw these pictures.
Yeah. I would love to pick your brain someday, James, and have you, back on the show to kind of talk about the church endorsed anti-Mormon literature stuff that you discovered at BYU. So when we are done with our temple series, definitely want to dig into that later.
Sure.
I remember the first time that I discovered that it had been changed was actually right after my affair. I kind of went through a removing my garments phase. I'm just mad at everything phase. You can read more about that in my book. But discovering that they used to do like the throat slitting and the bowel gashing and those types of things was, I mean, number one, if I had done that as part of my first experience, I probably would have struggled even more traumatizing for me, that I'm making promises to basically allow somebody to kill me or kill myself for revealing, like right now, what we are talking about, what we are doing, it will basically make it unforgivable for us to ever get back into the church. Like, I want to make that so, hey, listeners, let's talk about that for a second, because we're talking so specifically about what's going on in the temple, like detail by detail. None of us will probably ever be allowed back in to the church, even if we someday wanted back in. That's how serious talking about the temple on the outside of the temple is. So anyway, but I remember reading that, and like you, James, just being shook to my core that something doctrinal that's never supposed to change changed. So Mason, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think it speaks to, and MJ said something about this early on, and I wrote it down, and I can't remember exactly what it was now, but you were talking about how the church, I think it was about counseling, actually, the church has their black and white things. They're the prophets. They know, they speak for God. But then you look out and you see research that says, well, actually, if you look at this research, which is evidence-based empirical data, that's not what's going on at all. And that's where things start to crack for a lot of people, because these almost infallible people, like, it's an interesting phenomenon, because they'll say they're not infallible. Everyone will say that they're not infallible, but the reality is we all treat them like they're infallible. So you can say whatever you want. We treat them as if they're infallible. But the idea too with the temple is, like, they put themselves in this spot that is untenable, because they say, everything says these cannot be changed. Joseph Smith said these have to stay this way. And yet there's a lot of really icky stuff that existed in that. And so now the church is kind of changing the culture, saying, well, yeah, you're right, there is some icky stuff here. oh, the women are getting some power, I guess we better give them some power too. It is the same thing as like, the expose. Well, somebody got a hold of this stuff. They're going to expose us. Guess we better do it first. That's how the church works. They do not tell us until they're forced to tell us that something has happened. Even now, the changes in the temple, so many people don't have any idea that the temple has been changed because there's no place to learn about it. There's no place to talk about it. There's no history that is exposed. Well, and I shouldn't say no, but there's not much that comes from the church.
Right. You can talk about
That's
it in the
not
celestial
easily
room.
available.
Right. You can talk about it in the celestial room or in the temple president's office. But what is the ideal celestial room? How much talking are you allowed to do in there?
Right.
Go ahead, James.
They give you crap. They don't tell you. So I go in through the temple for the first time, and I'm like, okay, guys, we're in the celestial room. You can tell me everything now. What does it all mean?
Right.
And they're like, you need to pray, and one day you'll learn that. And so I'm going through the temple trying to figure out all the symbolism, trying to figure out where the heck the initiatory came from. I'm trying to figure out, I'm asking these questions, and I had no idea that they all knew because they had been through the temple pre-1990, and nobody is telling me when they're allowed to tell me, this is all masonry stuff, and you spill your guts out, and you slit your throat, and you
Yeah.
the
Right.
comes from
We're not going to
masonry.
talk about that.
We're not going to tell you that in the celestial room. We're allowed to tell you that in the celestial room. No. We're going to go right back to the same. So I was really pissed at my parents and the temple presidents who I talked to in the celestial room and my grandparents that I went through the temple with and asked questions in the celestial room because that's the authorized place. And they did not give me the answers.
I love that you guys are getting really close so that you're still in the screen here. So one of the things that I experienced was I went through the temple with my sister when she went through for her first time. And at that point, when she had gone through for her first time, I was really starting to struggle with the church, but I was excited to be there for my sister to go through the temple. And she had some questions, but her questions were more like, why was the oil and water in the initiatory, why was the container in the shape of a horn or something along those lines? I don't necessarily remember the specific question, but it was kind of like, why was the decoration? Why did it do this? Why did it do that? And she had I don't know, 2 or 3 questions. And after the second or third question, the temple patron that's there to answer questions said, honey, this is really the time that you're just supposed to reflect and be very reverent. Yeah. And she got shut down. And I was like, this is hilarious because yes, we've been told our whole lives, if you need to, so number one, we'll get to new names here in a minute. If you need to remind your spouse of what the new name is, the only place you're allowed to check in with your spouse to see if they remember the new name is in the celestial room. So I did that. Mason got checked in several times. I'm not allowed to know his, but he can know mine. So I would check in and he'd be like, it's this, right? It's, hang on a sec, this, right? Yes, it's this. Okay. I love her. Okay. And for the listeners later, we'll talk about, so it says, but that was it. And then I remember when Mason had a question, they wouldn't let us stay in the celestial room for that answer. They pushed him into the temple president's office and then he just got circular reasoning. Mace, did you want to say anything about that experience? And just so everybody knows, I GPSed at Mason. Since we're not worrying about our kids, we can go a little bit over the noon. Not a lot, but we can because I don't have to go back home and then back this way. Go ahead, Mason.
Okay. The only time I really asked a significant question, I feel like in the temple was that for those of you that are familiar with Mormonism at all, you have 3 accounts of the creation. One is in Genesis, one is in Abraham, and one is in the book of Moses. And then you have a 4th account that's in the temple. And ironically, the account in the temple, even though both Abraham and Moses were supposedly came through Joseph Smith as modern revelation, they don't coincide. There's differences. And so I asked the temple president, why is that? And I don't recall exactly what he said, but essentially there was no answer.
He said, "Doesn't the temple make more sense?" Is what he had said.
Oh, I love the progression in the temple better. It does
It makes more
sense.
logical and reasonable sense.
But you can't talk about it. You can't say, look, I've been through the temple and the story in Abraham and Moses, which Moses is supposedly revelation to Joseph Smith. They don't coincide. Like, why do we have these issues? And you can't talk about them. You get shuffled around. You spend your whole life thinking like what Amanda has on there. You can go to the celestial room and talk about whatever you want to talk about for 2 minutes, as long as you're whispering, right? You know, because there's another session coming out in a few minutes. We can't all still be in here. And so it's kind of this like empty promise that you're going to have better understanding, but the reality is you don't.
Hey, Mason, can you go ahead and read Amanda's comment since you referred to it for those that, you know, the podcast listeners that won't see it?
Sure. Amanda says you can barely talk in the celestial room and they don't even let you spend much time in there. So many times I was so happy to finally be in the celestial room and then they'd hurry me out. Yeah. And then she follows up for the next group behind you to come in. And then I love this comment. So for those of you that are participating in the group chat today, the don't ask questions, cult. And that's huge. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So James and MJ, did you have, go ahead, MJ.
Yeah. So finally, at the end of the initiatory process, when you receive your garment and you're given your new name, there's a blessing attached to the garment, and you wear it, and it will be in as much as you are faithful to your covenants, it will serve as a shield and a protection to you against the power of the destroyer until your time is finished on the earth. And that was so powerful to me. So the idea, I would run like 5 miles wearing my garments with exercise clothes over it because I wanted to have the power of the destroyer diminished in my life.
Right. Yep. It's the Captain America shield that you place on your body. It is supposed to be impenetrable. Go ahead, right. MJ.
Impenetrable. So that goes back to
I used that word on purpose. We'll come back to it.
Well, I'm going to go there.
Sorry, I just knocked my microphone. Go ahead.
Oh, it's such a constant presence in your life and in your sex life as a married couple. It would come off right before intimacy, and then it goes right back on. There's no snuggling. There's no falling asleep. It goes right
skin
back
to skin, right? Mm-hmm. No skin to skin contact, which is vital. I mean, truly skin to skin, non-sexual skin to skin contact with your intimate partner is so vital. It's the same as newborn babies needing that skin to skin for bonding and whatnot. Like, y'all, if you're not doing skin to skin with your sexual partners, start. Truly, I remember there was a time where like people would take a shower and leave one arm out so that it was always touching their body. Like, I was never taught that extreme, but I think in my grandmother's generation, it was. And I remember I had a time Mason and I went and visited my grandma, and I had bled through, periods. I'd bled through my garments really bad. And we were just traveling through, like, we're 3 hours away from home. And my grandma's like, oh, here, let's throw yours in the wash and you can wear mine. And my grandma still had the old fashioned kind that were basically open in the back, which they were very loose fitting. I was just like, what is all this fabric? And my grandma's bigger than me. But anyway, I wore her garments. They were quite interesting for going potty in, and hey, very easy for sexual access without even taking them off. I'm going to say that as well, because they were basically open at the butt. So you could take them down and open them up at the butt and potty and do whatever you need to do. I don't remember where I was going with that, but yeah, the garment had changed quite a bit.
It's the idea. It's the idea if you make it like that you don't ever have to take it off.
Thank you, Mason, for finishing that thought. Yeah.
And there's no instruction, of course. You get taught this. Do you wear a garment night and day as instructed in the endowment? but there's no instructions in the endowment about when it's okay for it to come off. They don't talk about sex. They don't talk about a shower. They don't talk about going to the bathroom. So you have this premise set up for extremity. You have the premise in place for people to justify, well, I'm in a shower, but I'm going to hold it outside the shower. Go ahead,
Right.
MJ.
So I was instructed, as you were, Sarah, to always have it as the closest layer to my body.
Mhm.
So I would, oh my gosh. Okay, so I would nurse my babies, right? And so I bought like a nursing bra, but that kind of seems silly. And then so I'd have to buy an oversized garment so that the neck would stretch down. Or if I wanted to access underneath, I would have to like just have a stretchy bra so I could stretch the bra up, and it would be like tight right here. And then
Right.
and
Well,
then
because right, I'm going to assume you've got the garment touching your skin, a bra on top of the garment, which for the record, y'all, means the bra does not stay in place because everything slips sliding away. And I got big old cha-cha mamas. Like, I'm not even gonna lie, y'all. If I look very heavy set in pictures a lot of times because I've got big boo-boos. And everybody out there, feel free to laugh at my big boobs. I've got the so in my book, the Thomas boobs, but the Trask boobs, I got that grandma gene. And so like I have an underwire bra and whatnot. And even with my very large breasts, my bra never stayed in place. So I'm constantly doing this in order to get the bra down. And so yes,
tuck it
nursing
down.
was a nightmare. Yes,
It
go
was
ahead,
always
MJ.
And then, as a breast cancer survivor and having had a partial mastectomy my first time, I ended up getting a prosthetic to go into my prosthetic, like to like tuck into my bra. And so
Mhm.
I would have my garment top, I would have my my skin, my garment, then the prosthesis, and then my bra on top. And then it
How
was
did
just
your prosthesis stay in place?
so
Mason stepped away because our 17-year-old just came to pick up our little kids from the front office. So Mason will be right back with us. But yeah, how did the prosthesis stay in place
I
with all of
eventually
that?
sewed a pocket in, and then I eventually bought a newfangled mastectomy bra that had a pocket, like that was like made for that.
Okay, hang on. So did you sew the pocket into the garment?
No, no, no. Oh, no.
Because yeah, you're not allowed to alter
I
the garment. Oh my gosh, this is like bringing back so many.
know so many tactile inks.
Yeah, well, and we're gonna actually do a whole podcast on some of the garment, but like we're gonna have to, when we do it, I'll have Alex take some of the clips from this one and add it in. Cause like for me, the garment became problematic again. So go back to my OBGYN bishop infertility specialist. I was getting back-to-back yeast infections and whatnot because I couldn't breathe. And I'm in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I already run hot. So I have multiple sclerosis. Did not know it at that time. And one of the things that is one of my primary symptoms is my body does not temperature regulate. So I've got all these layers. So of course I'm sweating. My vagina is not ever able to breathe and vent and cool off and what it needs to do for healthy, vajayjay flora. And so I'm getting all these infections back to back. And it was my bishop who was an OBGYN who told me it was okay to take them off during treatments in order for everything to breathe.
I was going to.
Yeah,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
And he had the authority as a doctor to sort of stamp that for you, and as your bishop to stamp it for you. So you could.
Okay,
Miller-
with
Right,
the
okay.
microphone, the microphone blipped out. I did not hear the end of MJ's sentence. Can you say that again, MJ?
Just that your doctor,
The bishop authority.
the doctor
Mhm.
authority, it gave you the stamp that you could, like you could be more confident in choosing that.
Yeah,
Right. Well,
absolutely.
because if it had come from a non-member doctor, I would have ignored it because I had already. And when I first took my garments off, it was not because I was leaving the church. It was because my MS had progressed to the point that in central Missouri summers, I was literally dying of heat stroke and getting heat sick. And I would go outside for 15 minutes. And then I would come inside. And if I didn't jump into a cold bathtub to bring my body temperature down, I was heat sick the rest of the day. And I told Mason, I was like, I'm done. I'm done with yeast infections. I'm done with this. I am taking the garment off. I actually got a temple recommend from my bishop and stake president here in Missouri. And I went in and they were like, are you wearing the garment? And I said, no, I'm not. And it's a medical reason. And I kind of had to laugh because my stake president, my bishop was like, I trust you. You're good. Like if you say it's a medical issue, the current bishop of our ward here is an amazing man, but I don't think he was raised Mormon, and he's very, you do the best that you can. But then when I saw the stake president, he was the one that was like, well, have you tried all the fabrics? Have you done this? Have you done that? And I just looked right at him and said, my OBGYN bishop from my last ward told me that this was the best option for my health. I've done everything you've said. And that was when, like, and I was like harsh. Like it was, I like put out that feel of, do not ask me about my underwear. That's gross and creepy. And do not ask me about my vagina. And I love this comment from Rhonda, which is permission from the patriarchy to wear underwear in a way that doesn't cause yeast infections. I'm pretty certain my stake president at that time was like a real estate investor. So, and yes, I was talking about my underwear with this man that I'm not married to. And he's like, have you done this? Have you called like Salt Lake and talked to them about some options? And I'm like, dude, I am in my mid 30s. Get out of my underwear. Like just stop thinking about what's underneath my pants. The amount of focus that we put on underwear is insane. So we probably need to come back because I want to make sure that I say something about the new names. Is there any other thoughts that you guys want to finish up on before we move back into new names? Go ahead, James.
Just military garments. Nobody told me going into basic training that I was allowed to not wear garments at basic training, even though it's in the church handbook. When you're young, you don't have access to the church handbook if you're not in leadership. And so
this was in 2000?
2000. Yeah. And I went to San Antonio.
Yeah. And you're not did you grow up in a military community? Cause like if you'd grown up in the church, like next to a military post or had parents or something. Yeah. So you had no.
And so, and I joined the Air Force. So my basic training, I joined the Air Force initially, and my basic training was in San Antonio, Texas, in the middle of like the summer heat. And so I brought my white garments because, and I brought, they had brand new, just come out with military garments, and the military garments are brown, which freaked me out. Like, how can you have brown garments?
You can buy Trauma Bonded, a true story of navigating attachments forged in complex PTSD by me, anywhere books are sold, including Audible. Right?
And but they were still sewn.
Yeah, they had the stitch.
They still had the stitching symbols, not on the inside like they do now. So,
right, they were visible to anybody that would see you in the underwear, but now they're like silk screened. They're like stamped in there. Yeah.
So I had to have a confrontation with my drill instructor, the training instructor they call them training instructors in the Air Force. He was like, "What are these unauthorized underwear doing in your locker? This is not, and I had to explain to him that they're religious." And he's like, "What? They're religious?" And then he called all 60 guys in my flight over to my locker to look into my underwear. And he's like,
sounds like a very good drill sergeant, actually. Like, let's talk about the culture of the military. That's like You just summed up the culture of the military. Keep going, James.
It's like these are religious garments, and anybody in here that makes fun of this guy for wearing his right as an American to worship how he pleases will have to deal with me. And here, hold those up so everybody knows what they are. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I'm like holding up my garments. If anybody sees him wearing these, do not make fun of him.
Well, you know, and that is a badge of honor in Mormonism. You got persecuted for standing up for your religion. You will be blessed. You are amazing. What an awesome demonstration of courage, James. I'm so proud of you. That was sarcastic.
So, yeah, absolutely. I got you.
Yeah. I'm saying that for the audience, not for you, James. Go ahead.
But every day I had to decide, am I going to wear my white ones with my brown military on top with my jacket on top in the hot summer, so 3 layers, or am I going to take the chance of wearing the brown military ones? And they tell you sometimes you have to unblouse, and you don't know when that's going to be at basic training.
Yeah.
And expose the markings of the garment. And so I went and did kitchen duty, and they told me I couldn't wear my blouse at kitchen duty, and I had the markings showing. And every person, hundreds of soldiers, I'm scooping potatoes onto the tray, hundreds of soldiers coming by. What's wrong with your shirt? Why are you sewing your shirt?
Well, then, I mean, we're laughing because we all get that military culture. Like, this is hilarious. Like, you could publish this story in a military magazine for Mormons or something. But the other thing is that nobody who has not been through the temple is supposed to see
Right.
those garments. So you're like in this dilemma of, do I wear them? But if I don't wear them, I'm in trouble. But if I wear them, and people see them, then I'm in trouble. Like, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Now, this picture right here is, I believe, from the church's website. So on here, there are no markings on the garment. Like, this is just to outline how they look today. But you don't have the square, the symbols on these ones. I'm sorry, say that again, MJ.
This is what they're choosing to put up?
I believe so. If I would have to go back to the original.
I don't think so. I don't think this came from the church's website, but it may have. I don't remember.
Yeah. Sure. So anyway, yeah. All right. So Mason and I have to go horseback riding here soon with our trainer. So we're going to kind of start to wrap up just a little bit, about 12:15. And Alex, I know I told you hard stop at noon. So if you have to go, just shoot me a message in the private chat, and we can continue to run this. I'm getting pretty good of working with Alex at bringing pictures up. It's kind of cool. Like, I'm learning. Okay, squirrel. Sorry, that was code to Alex of I'm doing good. There's my squirrel. There's Mr. Nutty. So when we talk about the new name, so this is at the very end of the initiatory. You get the new name. This is my new name. For anybody who knows me, when I got put on bed rest because of an abdominal surgery shortly after we adopted our oldest son, Eric, I discovered the movie series Friends. And so anyway, I love Friends. I will binge watch it. I've seen it hundreds of times. My brain is such with the MS that I still can't win at a Friends trivia. I would still lose, but just the characters and whatnot, I love them. I bawled when Matthew Perry passed away recently. I read his book as soon as it came out. Like, it came out and I had already pre-ordered it. And I absolutely loved Matthew Perry's book. I cannot remember what it's called, like Friends, Family, and Other Hurtful Stuff or something. I don't remember. Mason, can you look that up so I get that correct? Because I definitely want to honor
I have to.
Matthew. Well, and what I loved about that was his ability to be completely vulnerable about his struggles with addiction. So when I'm watching Friends and I see that the dimwit, lighthearted friend Phoebe is my new name, I was overjoyed. I was like, I have a really positive connection. I also have a great aunt named Phoebe, but I didn't know her very well. So my new name was special for me after Friends came out, because anytime Phoebe was on the screen, it was just this happy connection. So there's my new name. I have disclosed it. I'm now going to hell. For anybody who is concerned about my salvation, while I am there, I will definitely be serving Outback Steakhouse blackberry martinis and blackberry sangrias, because if I want an alcoholic beverage that I'm not making, but that's not at some super fancy place, I'm hitting Outback for their blackberry shit because it is good. Okay, so there's my thing. I knew pretty quick in a lot for this. A lot of people are surprised is that the new names in the temple are rotated based on the day that you go in. And the reason I figured that out is because one of the temple workers, when I went in, slipped to me that if ever I needed to know what my new name was, I just needed to call the temple and let them know um that I had forgotten my new name, and that they would look up the date that I went through for my initiatory. And if I didn't remember the date that I went in for my initiatory, then they could look it up on my membership record. So they were like, just let us know what day you went through and we can look it up. And then when I started going through the initiatories, because like Mason and I, we were super righteous in the beginning, right? And we had no kids. We were struggling with infertility. So we didn't have kids for a little while after we got married. And we made it a goal to like go to the temple like once a month or whatever. So lots and lots of times going through the temple. And I'm starting to recognize that the names are being recycled over and over. And so I figured it out pretty quick that they basically have, and I like to kind of joke, they have like 30 names that they recycle over and over for the men and the women. And in the beginning, I thought it was hilarious because my dad was, and unfortunately, I got this gene too, Mason, I'm going to admit this. My dad could not remember his own kids' names. Like he had nicknames for all of us because he could not get our actual names right ever. And so anyway, the thing that made me laugh is I was like, oh, well, I guess Heavenly Father can't remember all of our names either. So all of us get categorized in these 30 days plus the extra couple of people that went through on like the 31st where their name might have been different, or I didn't know. And yes, Lady Amanda 123. So we've got a different Amanda in here. Fun fact about Friends. I love the show. And when I was out of high school, I was going to go live with James and MJ. I realized Friends would offend MJ, and I decided I probably shouldn't live in her home since I watched it. Oh my gosh, there's a backstory for you. I will say this, Lady Amanda. I was an active Mormon and I just looked the other way. I loved it that much. Like there was a little shit in my show and I devoured it. It was amazing.
It was just the beginning of the end for her.
Oh, this is my favorite right here. I was so disappointed that the new name wasn't my new name. Go ahead, MJ.
So one of my traumatic experiences learning about, I knew the names were kind of recycled, and that we had like a certain day, but there was and I knew that like the girl that had gone through the temple with me the same day, that I knew her new name, but I wasn't going to talk about it or anything like that. But my in-laws worked at the temple, and there was one day that they were telling me that every time that they're working at the temple and it's MJ's day, they like give each other like a little acknowledging nod or something like, oh, this is MJ day. And I was shook. I was absolutely livid because that is mine. I'm not supposed to talk about it. You're not supposed to disclose it. And I'm like, why are you? Everybody's in on the joke but me. That this is mine. Of course, I told James because that's what we do.
I'm the only one who can know, and everybody else.
And everybody else in the world.
Yeah. So for me, it was the same. Mason knew, and all of his family and all of my family that joined me on that day know my new name. Now, I'm pretty certain Mason's family all forgot it. because they probably wouldn't care. But my family absolutely remembers it, and whatnot. So I kind of joked that, like, inside myself, oh, God cannot remember more than 62 names, because we've got, the 31 for the guys and the 31 for the girls. And then as I began to work with clients on being your own authentic self, I'm going, hang on a minute. So God is going to give me a name that half the world has. I cannot get into heaven without my code name. It's like the password for me to get into heaven. It's the very, like, at the veil when God's bringing you through. And I think it's like my husband's supposed to bring me through and represent God or whatever. It's not special anymore. Like, I'm going to be in the line with all the other Phoebes out there waiting my turn, because it's not individualized anymore. In cults, we talk about giving somebody a new name, and it's kind of this code name. And I mean, this is similar to that. It's different in the fact that the only time you utilize that name is the day that you go through the temple, and then apparently in heaven. I think Mason and I only went through the temple once on my name anniversary, so only one time. What did I get a repeat of Phoebe? And I remember getting into the temple chapel after I'd done the initiatory thing, whatever, or the new name reading, and in prep for the endowment. And I leaned over to Mason and I said, "Today's new name is mine." And he leans back and goes, "You're not supposed to say that." I was, oh shoot, I was just so excited that it wasn't like Mary or Martha, or what's the other one I heard all the time? Edith, something. There's some nasty ones, y'all. And sorry if that's your given name, but anyway, it just you're fine.
It's money. It's money. It's our business phone.
Oh, you're fine. Yeah. You're totally fine. You guys make sure you take care of yourself. So yeah, for me, it really came down to something that was supposed to be so special and so private wasn't. And it just kind of, like, for me, put that cap on you're telling me all these things that I'm supposed to do, and then you break all those rules. And it's okay when you do it, but it's not okay when I do it. So things like things like Mason's family is huge on do not exaggerate. Like, and Lee's, my side of the family, we're amazing storytellers, and we love to embellish the facts and present them as actual facts rather than embellishing for the storytelling feature. That's like a Lee family tradition. And they all do it, and it's so much fun. Not really. They all claim that I'm the liar, and everybody else gets to do it, and they're not a liar. That's some bitterness coming out right there. Family trauma.
Right, as Alex put on there, rules for thee, for me.
Right, exactly. Rules for thee, but not for me. Correct. And so, like, when I found out that the prophet President Nelson had exaggerated his, the burning plane story and the lady next to him freaking out, and then the attack in Africa one, and then was it Holland's, I think, for the missionary story of the brothers. And I'm listening to this, and they're all embellishing and presenting these as factual stories. I was like, why do they get to do it and I don't? Like, why am I getting punished? And the same family members are like, that's no big deal. They were making a spiritual point. And I'm like, it was no big deal. Why is it no big deal for them? But it's a big deal for me when I'm just trying to establish my point, because y'all aren't listening at all. So I'm getting louder and bigger in order to be heard. But the prophet gets to do it. It was really troubling for me. And so this idea of don't talk about your new name. You're only going to use it twice. It's special for you, only to come down to everybody who ever works in the temple has access to that list. My family that came in, they all know it. I can't know theirs because I didn't go through with them. I went through with my sister. I don't remember hers. Go ahead, Mason.
Well, I was just going to say the same as some of the things we've already talked about. Like, you can still make it special with disclosure, right? You can still say, hey, look, We have, so that we'll remember these things, we have kind of a rotating thing. You're going to get a name. It is it is still what it is, what the endowment says it is, the code word, the name of the token. It is still something special for you. It is still yours. But when you hide it, it's almost like hiding it is going to make you hold on to it tighter, when the reality is if you understand and you care about it, you're going to hold on to it tighter. You can say, look, the name is rotating. We do that just for simplicity, but this is still the name of the token for you. We want you to hold this sacred. Yeah, sure, it's not as special as maybe we would like it to be, but it's still special to you. It's still yours, instead of having people along the way hear about it and have to come to terms with it.
Right. It's a discovery after the
Right?
fact.
Right. I thought this was such a piece of me, and you've taken that away, instead of disclosure and then giving you the gift, and then you can hang on to it. Go ahead, James.
I think it's interesting in church history, Joseph Smith and the brethren, Porter Rockwell, they all had code names that they used for one another in their correspondence. My guess is that that's their new names, because it came from Masonry and it was a way to evade law enforcement using a different name.
Yeah.
And so that's my speculation and guess, is that they were actively using their new names as code for themselves.
Right.
But
Well, and
getting away from
fun
the law,
fact,
Right.
right. Fun fact, in Joseph Smith's day, when you disclosed Masonry secrets, murder was a normal thing. Like, look at the history of Masonry and people who disclose those secrets. And several members of that angry mob that came after Joseph Smith were Masons and pretty angry. James and MJ, do you guys have anything else that you'd like to add about the new name or the challenging things about it? And then also, audience, we are getting ready to wrap up. So if you have any final thoughts that you'd like for us to address or put up on the screen about your experience with the new name and the discovery that it's not as secret or special and whatnot, or its affiliation with kind of that cult-like mentality, now's your chance before we hang out.
So I'll just share that I'm not ready to disclose my new name,
And that's
which
fine.
is really weird. But there's still a hold there. We do have children who are still in the church, and so as we navigate our having left the church, we removed our names from the record earlier this year. As we navigate it, I also feel like a desire to honor what's sacred to them still. But as far as my own,
it's not sacred to you.
It's not sacred to me. It's sacred to them. But I do feel like this primal fear that is still part of me, that the church still has a hold on me, and it's just true.
Well, and I want to say that that's going to be normal. You know, one of the things I hear a lot in the ex-Mormon community is, oh, I've shed all of it. I'm trying to get as far away from it as I can. And really, from that behavioral health perspective, I would say you're never going to get rid of all of it, because especially if you grew up with it in your formative years, there's always going to be a shadow. And the shadow is not something that we want to be afraid of. It's something we want to understand, so your shadow grows and shrinks based on where you're standing in the sun at the time that shadow is there. And that's very symbolic of your journey out of Mormonism. There are going to be times where the shadow of the church is going to be, really wide or really tall, or it's going to seem like it stretches on forever. And other times where it's barely visible under your feet based on where you are in relation to your journey out, what's going on around you, so for Mason and I, all of our children are happily out, but our parents and siblings not even close. And Mason's family especially really struggle because Mason was the Nephi of his family. He's the only sibling that served as a bishop and in those higher leadership callings. And so, dependent on what's going on around you, what your position is in the sun is going to change how that shadow affects you, but you cannot detach yourself from something that had such a strong influence on you for so long. It doesn't mean that the shadow is bad. Learn to understand it and gauge how you're functioning with that shadow. And I like to think of it as like when I'm a little kid and I'm carefree, I dance with my shadow and I know that my shadow can't hurt me anymore. But it's still there and I can dance with my shadow. And when I don't have one in a moment, that doesn't mean it's not going to come back in the near future. So, the last thing I wanted to share with you, MJ, I forgot when we were talking about the garments and when we were talking about how that's like that impenetrable shield. I wanted to point out that I was wearing my garments when I cheated on my husband. And so obviously Satan had a hold of my heart. Either that or it was trauma and trauma bonding that was strongly influencing it, that my garments, my Captain America shield like had holes in it or something. I don't know. Because I was wearing that garment all the way up to when I cheated on my husband. And then when I took my garment off in anger and rebellion, there was no more affair. So I would just like to point that out. It's kind of this promise that you're going to have something. And then they talk about your faithfulness. A lot of people will be like, oh, well, you weren't being faithful. So then the fabric couldn't protect you because you weren't being faithful. And I would say, if you read my book, you're going to see I was doing the best damn job I knew how to do, being faithful. And then when I was like, nope, I need a break, I was happier. It was amazing. So anyway, anything else that we want to add before we close out?
Just a quick little.
I think MJ and Mason, did you both raise your hand?
No, I'm so content and just really grateful for this time we shared. Thank you.
Absolutely. Mason, go ahead.
I've mentioned this before, but I feel like it's just important to mention it now too. Like when you give every meaningful thing in your life a tag as being good or bad or influenced by God or Satan, I know most of the time it feels a little more comfortable, but in reality, it's not helpful because you put your trust in things that aren't really there to help you or whatever. It can be spiritually uplifting, but you also have to have a sense of reality for what's going on too. And so, if it brings comfort, cool, but if you escape reality with it, then it's not going to help you in the long run.
I love that, Mason. You're talking about black and white thinking, and black and white thinking is very limiting. It limits your ability to grow. It limits your ability to connect with the people around you. It limits communication. It limits understanding. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why my LDS clients really struggled, because they did not have experiences with flexibility of thinking, because within their church system, everything was very black and white. Examples of black and white are going to be good and bad, righteous, evil, anything where you're looking at polar opposites and you're not looking at things on a spectrum or in the gray area. It really limits our ability to improve ourselves in lasting, meaningful ways outside of our comfort zone. Go ahead, Mason.
Yeah, well, and I think why that matters is because, like with this example, you're talking about what happened with your affair, and the focus is on whether or not the garment actually matters or helps or was a part of this, instead of focusing on why am I in this situation? What's going on in my life that has allowed me to get to where I am? It doesn't have anything to do with the garment. It probably doesn't even have anything to do with your righteousness. In your case, it didn't have anything to do with what you were trying to do with your life.
Right.
It had everything to do with, in your case, trauma bonds or the trauma that was going on in your life. But we're not allowed to take a look at those things. We have to look at these outward things like garments or righteousness. Oh, shoot, I didn't take the sacrament on Sunday. I'm susceptible. That's why I had an affair. That's crap. That doesn't have anything to do with what's going on. And it stops us from looking at where we are and why we're making the decisions that we're making, so that we can understand ourselves better and then be more authentic to who we want to be as we move forward.
Right. For us, it really stopped, Mason, your ability to connect with your own betrayal, trauma, and feelings of hurt because you were on a mission to check the boxes, forgive and forget, and move forward. So, alrighty. Does anybody, MJ and James, do you have anything else you want to add before we wrap up today?
No, I'm good. I appreciate the opportunity to share.
We love having you guys here.
Thank you.
Thanks,
And Mason, just so you can see Luke's comment, he says he loved the way you put that. Yeah. Thank you so much, Luke, for joining us. So as we wrap up today, I want to remind everybody that the Daisy Girl store, let's do it again. I think Alex and I are thinking the exact same thing. The Daisy Girl store is live if you would like to get some fun merchandise like where did my camera go? This is like the best insulated tumbler ever. Stainless steel water bottle. Ooh, there we go. We've also got some Raising Crazy merchandise so you can drink your alcohol and laugh at the fact that your children are making you a little bit crazy. So that is live. We also want to remind you that if you would like to donate to the nonprofit organizations that we are creating, again, as of right now, this would not be nonprofit. This money would go to helping us set that up because there's a lot going on that goes into setting up a nonprofit. So we would appreciate that. We will absolutely be transparent with those funds. So that way we will post at some time you'll be able to find it on our website as those funds come in and as they're used. We will have like a spreadsheet for you to verify that we are utilizing those funds the way that you have asked us to, which is very important for those of us in the post-Mormon world. And then lastly, my producer gave me the very good news that the movie trailer sound, he got that fixed. And so I'm going to say thank you so much for joining us today. I absolutely loved the engagement that we had from our audience. If you like what we're doing, please share us because that's the best way for us to get the word out and have kind of these behavioral health focused discussions where our goal is really to improve healing for those who have the same type of trauma or religious trauma that we have. So we love you and thank you so much. All right.